It's October, and that means two things. I get to enjoy National Taco Day, and I'm legally mandated to play a horror game. It all sounds well and good, there's just one problem. I am a coward who can't handle being jump scared.
What?
So, I thought this was the perfect time to play and 100% Silent Hill F, my first in the series. On the way, I would visit a picturesque old-timey Japanese village to get the real experience, go and see the beautiful flowers and wildlife, and of course, get my eyeballs on a game that bloody stunned me. Here's how it went. Before I even start the game, I'm given scalable difficulty settings for both combat and puzzle solving, ranging from story to Lost in the Fog, which appears to only be selectable for puzzles. How do they make the puzzles harder, anyway? We're going to be doing multiple playthroughs anyway in pursuit of completion, and I'm assuming that Lost in the Fog for combat is some kind of New Game Plus exclusive. So, we'll begin with a chill story run and see how it goes. As always, the first rule is that we'll go in blind and figure things out on the way, checking in later for help if we need it. But as I'm about to load in, I get a third option. To select my school uniform colour. There's no option to Silent Hill press F to pay respects to my self-respect if I pick this pink look with the bunny ears, so I go for the classic black, and we are finally ready to get started. This game is set in Japan, rather than the picture I've built up in my head of Silent Hill being some midwestern hillbilly town where spooky fog rolls in at sundown. Maybe the fog is on summer vacation this time around. The scene is set by this gorgeous sequence of shots of this 1960s Japanese village, abundant with ancient shrines, babbling brooks alongside the rickety old paths, and that style of house. I don't know enough about architecture to be able to give you a proper name for it, but you know it's the type that they use to say, "Hey look, we're in Japan." Our dad has anger management issues. We give our aspirational shrine maiden sister a charm with a cat bell that surely won't crop up as a plot point later, and head down into town to meet up with our friends. So this game is written by Ryukishi07, who I can only describe as a truly evil man whose only modus operandi is to mess with your head, because he wrote both Higurashi and Umineko. I played the latter of those two visual novels almost an entire decade ago, and it's still to this day one of the most mind-bending gaming experiences I've ever had. In fact, the reason I was so excited to play Silent Hill F, despite having never dipped into the franchise before, was because he was helming the story. They essentially gave him a big budget to bully us all collectively. As we walk through the town, we notice that it's weirdly empty. There's no hustle or bustle, and through ambient conversations and newspaper scraps lying around, we learn that somebody has died recently, and there are strange purported gas leaks and earthquakes. Things aren't right. We meet Shu, and my first assumption is that he's main girl Hinako's high school boyfriend. But then, this other girl appears and asks what we're talking about, and oh boy, is this an awkward love triangle 10 minutes into the game? You ain't slick, Shu. There's something so unnatural about the interactions with these girls. I can't get a read on it. They're acting like friends, but this entire conversation screams to me that they are her high school bullies deriding her. It's surreal. Fake nice. But then the fog rolls in. One of the girls decides to break out in the world's worst case of zits. Don't worry, I'd play dead as well in this situation. And a chase sequence begins. This is pretty simple. We just follow the path and do our best to avoid the grass and flowers, much like I do whenever I go outside. A ladder is thrown down to rescue us from the impending fog, and as I climb up I get the achievement for escaping the fog monster without being hit. We are well and truly on the board. Apparently Shu had enough foresight to leave us a nice handwritten note in exactly the right spot, and a handful of ibuprofen, which adds to my mental narrative that he is A, suspicious as heck, and B, probably not real at this point. We need to make it back to the store, so I start to traverse the twisting, winding back alleys of this town that could definitely do a better job in terms of signage. And on the way, we encounter this lady. Surely a very lovely individual, but I wasn't in the mood to socialise. This is where the game teaches us about dodging to avoid enemy attacks, so I zip past her and continue onwards. Eventually, I find my way into this house, which has the most unique key holder I've ever seen in my life. I guess it's supposed to be a conversation piece? But then the owner comes out and she is pissed that we didn't properly compliment it, so we give them the ring around and climb out onto the roof to escape. We find a save point and learn about enshrining and offerings. Most items you find in-game have two uses. They can either be used to restore HP, sanity, or stamina, or they can be enshrined, aka sold, at a save point. The faith currency gained from enshrining these items can be spent to draw Omamori, which provide permanent equipable buffs. The first one I draw can be used to decrease enemy line of sight, which sounds so incredibly overpowered that I equip it immediately. We get a metal pipe and an introduction to combat next. You can light attack, heavy attack, or focus and counter, though each damages the weapon's durability and eats through your stamina real quick, and taking damage harms not only your health, but also your sanity. But what happens when you lose sanity? I have no idea. We take care of the living doll though and make our way back to the store where we're able to lay our fallen friend to rest. At least she doesn't need flowers on her grave, I guess? We defend the store from an onslaught of enemies, and it's here that I realise something very important. Combat in Silent Hill isn't fun, and I don't think it's meant to be. I feel like it becomes this thing that you're supposed to dread and to be avoided whenever possible. Or maybe I'm just reading way too deeply into it and it's kind of clunky. It's here that I make a mental note that dodging enemies is probably better than fighting them though. We pass out and wake up in a dream world. At least I'm assuming it's our dreams, because there's a knockoff Love and Deep Space character here holding Hinako in his arms. He leads us out into the night with nothing more than a lantern for protection through these torii gates that are covered in charms. Then, like the gentleman he is, this guy walks inside the temple, locks us outside, and leaves us to go and find our own way in, as what I can only assume is his pet dog comes out to play. This faceless monster is fast, and with only some useless dagger to fight back, I quickly found that running is probably better than trying to fight. To get inside the temple, I need to explore this area whilst avoiding my stalker, finding 3 particular Emma from the dozens that are hanging around, and spinning them to find the 3 sigils that act as the combination for the lock. We know what the 3 animals we're looking for are from this clue, left conspicuously next to a creepy doll at the zone's entrance. Once we make it inside, we find "Don't trust the fox mask" written on the shrine, which is always promising. Something attacks us and we faint, waking up back in the town in Shu's arms. Bro is not beating the allegations, because on learning that our friend is dead, he hits us with this.
What is happening?
But we still don't know where our other friend is, so we try to head off and locate Rinko. We learn about focus attacks, which require charging and directly cost sanity to use, and head out into the paddy fields towards her house. Upon exploring a nearby house, I find autopsy reports about corpses with bugs inside them, and find this charming box that looks back at me. I discover that this scarecrow disappears when I turn my camera, and that is not okay. I find a key to Sakuko's mailbox up in the north, and get jump scared by this monster on the way to my objective. What? I need to pass through this locked building to continue, but as luck would have it, the key falls down the well, and I have to slowly and painstakingly crank the platform back up to the top to retrieve it, as this fine fellow assaults me. This guy is slow, but his attacks are devastating, and I get caught once or twice because I get a little bit too enthusiastic about trying to get the key and lose track of his wind-ups. With the key in hand, we escape through the building, leaving the slug man firmly behind us. I spend the next while convinced that something is wrong with Shu. Either he's secretly an evil genius, or I'm imagining him and he's dead. He drops in and out of existence at the drop of the hat, which is either indicative of Hinako's psychosis, or that his skeleton has escaped his body and is off doing its own spooky scary thing. We have to cut across the fields themselves, and in order to find the way, we have to check these grotesque scarecrows to find the ones that resemble our main character, and pull out the flashcards embedded in their skins. And if we're right, They rearrange like somebody pulled a ripcord out of them to show us which direction to head in next. The poses they make are absolutely insane though. If we find the wrong one, I get to see why the Scarecrow won Employee of the Month. Because he was out standing in his field. I make it to Rinko's place and she comes out safe and sound. She runs to Shu and I still can't quite gauge what's going on here between these three. Is he a player? Is Rinko a delusional hater blinded by jealousy? Or are we the bad guy? We retreat into the house together, learning that there's no escape from the town. The bridge is broken, and so we decide that the best way to get to safety is to take the mountain paths, passing through the middle school on the way. The girls go to check the house for supplies before they depart, and in this moment, it becomes clear that it wasn't just me being paranoid or overly sensitive. It's fair to say the vibes were off because she gives us the death stare and shoves us down the stairs. We find our way back in the Fox's domain, traversing this seemingly endless labyrinth of wooden walkways. In a room here, we find our first Emma. This is Silent Hill F's version of upgrades, and I invest this first one into extending my health bar to make combat a little more forgiving. Whilst rummaging through the rooms to find the key that will let us proceed, I stumble across this terrifying letter that I can only assume is from the Fox. All I can say is I hope he isn't a man of action. There's this room where all the women's faces are blotted out, and when they drop to the ground, more warnings not to trust the Fox guy are hidden behind them. Brother is about as trustworthy as a promise from Peter Molyneux. In this altar room, I decide to go 1 versus 1 against an enemy with my tiny tinsy little knife, despite there being a perfectly good Naginata sat right over there 3 feet away, illuminated by the light. Somehow, I genuinely didn't notice it at all until after the fight, so I think it's fair to say it puts my vision into question. We get introduced to these stacked doll enemies that stun you every time you come close and drain your sanity, and it makes this entire escape sequence a scary, stressful nightmare to deal with. At the end of the zone, we come face to face with Sakuko, who is much less dead than she was the last time we encountered her, and also much less human. This is the game's first real boss fight, and whilst the attack animations are gorgeous and haunting, it's a pretty simple standard affair of dodge then hit, or hit then dodge, albeit a little later on she starts teleporting around and charging up this big blast, which if we're quick enough to get to her, we can interrupt. The entire time she's hurling insults at us. Traitor, liar, aren't we supposed to be friends? She's about to deliver the final blow, and then the Fox guy jumps in to defend us, and I don't believe a word of it. Confirming my theory, he makes us drink the spicy water and we pass out, drifting back into reality. It's reality, surely, right? We wake up, for some reason, don't mention the stair pushing incident, and continue onwards. The cattiness continues as we route back through the town, and it's haunting seeing how it's degenerated in the few hours we've been gone. The flowers have spread and taken over, and the horrors are prowling the streets freely. Our second time through the back alleys and dilapidated pathways is much more threatening than the start of the game, and I run into some new enemy types on the way that I just decide to run away from. Eventually, the buildings peel back and make way for shrubbery, and we leave the confines of the town, making our way out into the woods towards the middle school. At one point here, Rinko says something that makes way too much sense and sits in the back of my mind for the next few hours. She says that Hinako is dead. The topic is dropped before we get a chance to explore it any further, but all I'm saying is, I'm the one with the steel pipe. We make it to the school, and to proceed we need to find the stairwell key, which conveniently is apparently my job. I spend a lot of time looking for locker codes and exploring every classroom, and on the way I get to meet a Short King. The school playground has the weirdest climbing frame I've ever seen, so I make myself quickly scarce. We make it into Hinako's classroom and find a puzzle box sat on Rinko's desk. We need to match the little pictures with the journal notes we found, and as we solve our way through each, we get these small scraps of paper presumably written by Junko for Shu but never delivered. She talks about Hinako no longer being with us, pleading with him to move past it. In the top, I obtain the key I've been searching for. I head back to the others and they tell me that I've been working hard enough and should rest whilst they keep watch. And Hinako just does it. She just goes to sleep right away. What? Reality in this game is so weird, and it makes me think that maybe it isn't reality after all. We wake back up in Fox's definitely not a cult headquarters, and he tells us to quote-unquote bid our farewells. At this point, Hinako sounds like she's well and truly in a trance. This entire area is one big puzzle. Pulling a lever will open certain doors, and in exchange lock others, and I need to navigate through this big maze to find 2 keys that will allow me access to the main chamber. I'm able to keep my big badass Naginata from the last time though, and that definitely makes this entire section less scary to deal with because it doesn't have any durability limitations. Partway through, I find some excerpts of Sakuko's diary, which paints a very different picture than the one I had initially. Ones that make Rinko seem like a thoughtful friend, and Hinako more cold-hearted. There's this horrible moment where they show you this speedy enemy behind the door, and then they make you open it knowing you'll release him to hunt you down, which I think is quite mean. When we get to the first key, we see Sakuko in a cage in front of us. I guess this is what the fox guy meant by bid our farewells, because we walk away, leaving her screaming in the dark alone. On the other side of the maze, we find a copy of Rinko's bedroom, with her 1 million attempts to capture Shu's good side. We see the Short King again, activate the room's dark mode, and in short order grab the last item we need to slot into the device that will give us the second key. Doing this lowers Rinko into the lava, which apparently is just a normal thing. Like, why is nobody reacting to this? The last friend we bid our farewell to is Shu, but on the way we get caught up in a boss fight against this big purple bunch of grapes. The boss battle itself was actually pretty chill despite appearances. Our gross opponent will lay eggs that will eventually hatch into basic enemies if left alone for a while, but she moves so slowly and her attacks don't have too large of an area of effect that it's pretty easy to just avoid her and keep blapping her with my weapon. After we win, we can enter the hall to find that Shu has just been hanging out this whole time. We unceremoniously drop him and move on. It's so weird that Hinako is just acting in a way that is so opposed to what you'd expect from the earlier sections of the game. Either she's in a trance or possessed by the fox, or what I'm edging towards instead is that we don't know her full story, motivations or actions, and that there's a darker side to her here. We wake up back in the classroom all alone, and now it's getting dark out. Did Shu and Rinko abandon her, or are they actually dead? I finally make my way through the mountains all alone, making my way towards our original goal. Surely they went on without me, and on the way I get chased by the fog monster we encountered at the very start of the game. It gets stopped by the Torii gates and we finally get some safety for a moment. We continue onwards to Shu's house, and in the shed we find a cute little note from him that talks about Hinako's persistent headaches and how he's working on a herbal remedy to help her. His simping truly knows no limits. Just as we're getting into the house, the fog monster catches up to us, knocking us out with its big, furry appendage. Back in the Fox factory, and suddenly there's talk of a ritual of some sort, which Hinako is apparently fully on board with, she's concerningly into it. This section involves exploring through this maze to find each of the 3 ritual rooms, with a handful of mandatory battles and a lot of running away on my part. They hand out healing items like candy here, and I quickly run out of inventory space before I can sell anything. But the 3 rituals are really what's memorable here. After a quick hand-holding session, the first ritual takes place, and Hinako saws her own arm off slowly and viscerally to accept a new one from the fox. This unlocks new attacks using it, and also forces me to soul siphon enemies upon killing them to prevent them from resurrecting. I guess now there truly are 2 wolves inside of her. We fight another Pregante Peter and head onwards to the second ritual, which involves branding Hinako's back with a fiery pole. This unlocks bestial form, which is a phase that charges up over time and makes her stronger, faster, and able to kill monsters without needing to soul siphon them. I'm not sure why we've suddenly gained limit break in a horror game, but hey, who am I to deny a girl her hobbies? But the third and final ritual is to take place next, and this one is the one that made me really squeamish. To complete her transformation to be perfect for the Fox Guy, these fully transformed Shrine Maidens use a blade to cut Hinako's face off, replacing it with this fox mask that fuses to her. When she starts to break down and panic at the pain, the fox brainwashes her out of it and back into a trance. There's a bunch of references to being reborn and a new life, and we encounter the Shrine Maiden, who is this monstrous molten version of Rinko. This boss battle is the coolest by far, with threatening attacks and adds that spawn and chase after you, exploding as they scream. With the new bestial form though, it doesn't take too long to dispatch of her, and we finally win the war for Shu, who is probably still off hanging out somewhere. Back in the real world, we have an encounter with Junko, our sister, with mottled skin like she's a zombie, and a mask reminiscent but starkly different to the fox's. And our next goal is to head straight towards the Shimizu residence. To get there, we have to wrap around back through the town proper, which, even more so than before, has become overrun with monsters. I avoid a handful of battles, but it's inevitable that I have to win some head-to-head. As we head through the park, we get a flashback of a childlike Hinako meeting some older kid called Kotayuki, and at this point, I have no idea who that is. The trek through the town is stressful. Those bloated pregnant enemies that were a boss just an hour or two earlier are suddenly relegated to trash mob status now. Like their managerial badge has been yoinked away and they've been told to go out and do some crime, like a regular peon. I have to fight 2 on the way to our house, and they're so tanky that they burn their way through some of my repair kits and weapons, leaving my reserves a little thin. I do make it through though, and as I walk through the front door to home at last, the phone rings. Whatever is on the other side when I pick up is sure to be terrifying.
Hello! Remember to subscribe to the channel if you like the video. Thank you!
Like I said, terrifying. The house has warped and expanded into a shape that's barely recognizable compared to its original form. Now it's this endless maze, shifting and getting more grotesque with each lap that I take through. To break free, I have to find 3 sigils and use them to open a door in the first loop of the residence. These aren't too hard to get hold of. Firstly, I find this room with family photographs hanging all around, and in between the cupboards in pride of place, a family photo. Except, Hinako's face is scratched out and her individual portrait is gone. We find the missing portrait and hang it on the wall upside down, popping out the sigil and letting us progress. As I continue to explore, I get another lovely little flashback in which our father explains to us his preference in hot drink, and shortly afterwards I get literally bullied by a dog with a mohawk. I find a block of wax. Wait, is that supposed to be wax? I thought those were fingernails. But this is good because earlier on I found a bottle of propane, which, as well as being an excellent conduit for accessories, can also be connected with a pipe to a burner and used to warm and melt things. I find the tubing, go back to the propane, and conveniently there's a key inside it. In this room I come up against the greatest foe I have encountered thus far, a vase. Like, how can it be possible that this is able to single-handedly block my entrance to the next room? An immovable object certainly didn't meet an unstoppable force in this case. Hidden in a small room off in the corner, I locate this huge doll with an eye that follows me as I move, and I swiftly make an exit before I see where the inevitable second eye is. Once I find all the sigils, I'm able to open the door and continue onwards, and discover that the locked room is actually the entrance to Hinako's bedroom, and inside, she's there waiting for us. But which one is real? This whole section is clearly symbolic of the 2 sides of her at war. What does she want, really? At this point, I guessed it was real-world Hinako versus Fox Disciple Hinako. We chase after her and come face to face with our parents, who, just like our friends before, morph into grotesque caricatures of themselves. So now we have to fight Dad Blob and Mum Glob. The former is an enemy we've ran into and ran away from before, and the latter a new and extremely annoying ranged attacker. I decide to go full force on Mum Glob first to take her out, basically ignoring the dad and hoping this doesn't turn into some kind of Ornstein and Smaug when I take one of them out. This is pretty messy to start with, and I get chunked by the pair a couple of times, but eventually I take down the Mum Glob and just have to contend with the Dad Blob. This is much easier. He's slow, and in this case slow and steady does not win the race, so I bap his nose enough for him to leave as well. The cutscene after is so weird. They go back to their human forms and walk outside the front door, and there they are with this thing, and then both of them go pop, and I wake up inside the fox's domain at the end of the ritual. He hits us with the cringiest one-liner of 2025 bar none,
Serves as proof that you are mine.
and lets us loose on another puzzle. This time we have to find 3 crests hidden around the area and slot them into this huge mural in the correct spots. Where do they go from all these options? Well, for now, I have no idea. This area is short and quite easy though. Fox statues show me the door to take, and there will be a few mandatory enemies to find and optional side rooms. Then the crests will be in an obvious chest signposted at the end of the path. There is this one horrible fight though, where I have to go up against a fake mouldy dad with a weapon and a handful of marionettes, all of which only die when I use a soul siphon, which has a cast bar. This is a mess, and I chomp through a good amount of my heals dealing with it. In this last room, there are 9 foxes inside you instead of 2. In the third room, we meet our sister who reminds us to kill the other Hinako before something really bad happens. With that riveting information in mind, we grab the last crest and slot them in with the fox at the front and the 2 birds in conflict with one another, which lets us go through. This scene was one that I wasn't expecting whatsoever though, even though clearly I should have. Hinako and the fox dude share a marriage ceremony, and then she wakes up back in the town as its transformation is nearing completion. Her parents' clogs are sat there bloodied and lacking feet. She breaks down into a rage and we give chase to the Shrine Maiden monster that killed them, and I'm gonna be real, this was my least favourite part of the game. This entire sequence takes 10 to 15 minutes of running in pursuit for a little bit, and then you get blocked into a forced battle against a pregnant mini-boss and a handful of smaller enemies, and then you chase a bit more and repeat. 3 times. That's right, you have to do this whole thing 3 times in a row. I ran out of heals early because I had been rushing and had to play super safe, and at times things got incredibly sketchy. I did manage to make it through without dying, but it was close. When we make it through, it becomes clear that the monster in the marriage garb is Hinako, the Hinako that got married to the fox. The other half of her, one of her sides. Back in the Fox Fiesta, we see this haunting scene where the flowers eat her alive after the marriage, and she morphs into this faceless being. Not a person, but just a wife, an underling of the fox. Hinako and herself fight. The final boss of the game is seemingly you yourself. This one is mostly easy, it's just there's this one attack that, for me at least, was seemingly unavoidable, and it does huge damage and drains my sanity massively. At the end, I had eaten through every single heal, and it was me or her. Luckily, it was her. I won, and an achievement popped up for defeating her without dying once. The ending has us escaping, and then we suddenly find ourselves struggling through the town. Red capsules are everywhere. Voices are treating Hinako like she's crazy. Then we're back in the shrine. People are trying to calm us down, sirens are blaring, and then the game ends. So what the hell is going on? Well, after this run, I have a bit of an idea. Hinako is being sold by her father to a rich family in an arranged marriage, and her sister is either directly involved in organising the match, or has stood to the side and just let it happen. Hinako's at war with herself. Does she accept it? Does she run away? She's been taking these nice little red pills that Shu introduced her to, though she doesn't know that they contain hallucinogens and she becomes addicted. They're meant to be just for headaches, but instead, they're for going really bloody crazy. The post-credit scene is a police report mentioning a wedding massacre, which is clearly the end result of mixing arranged marriage, drugs, and a teenage girl. With all the wedding iconography, I can only assume that all those Hinako is dead references are talking about her last name being replaced, and the single her being erased when she becomes a bought and sold bride. Bit grim, really. But this is clearly not the whole story. With the first playthrough finished, I feel like I've just scratched the surface. I only have a cursory understanding of what's going on with the plotline, and apparently those red pills I've been taking since minute 5 of the game are bad. It's clear I have more to learn. Silent Hill F has 5 endings, and I've just seen the first. Now that I've completed a run, I can see the criteria to unlock new endings in the main menu. Ending 2 and 3 mention a sacred sword, and to avoid taking red capsules for the entire playthrough, so I'm gonna go for those next and hopefully pick them up in the same playthrough, as well as all the collectibles we missed along the way. This time, we'll be doing both combat and puzzles on hard. A new playthrough means new outfit, and so we go with the hot pink and bunny ears. I swear some of the voiceover has changed here too. Dad confirms that Hinako is being sold to cover his debts, the absolute scoundrel. On the way down to the town, I notice that this house is open this time around, and after an Easter egg hunt, I managed to gain the journal entry for the sacred sword and begin that questline properly. Because sanity is much more of a concern this time around, I spend my first 2 Emma upgrading the meter so that it's comparable to both health and stamina. I'm eyeing up that 4th Omamori slot, but it's so expensive that I'll have to wait until later. The first section of the game is simple enough to deal with. The first time I run into any problems is my first entry into the Fox Shrine, in which I have to grab a couple of collectibles that I missed, as well as some that are New Game Plus exclusive, whilst dealing with the puzzle and the prowling enemy. There's an achievement for completing this section without being hit once, which would be fine in most cases, but when I grab one of the collectibles, it forces these 3 enemies to spawn all around me, and one of them screams as I try to escape and deals the tiniest bit of chip damage, forcing me to reset. It takes a couple of tries, but eventually I perfect dodge them, finish the puzzle, and move on. Whilst heading towards the farmyard fields, I find this flask and take it over to a small shrine nearby as an offering. The steps towards the sacred sword, which is a major requirement for a lot of the endings we've left to get, require doing this all over the game, and now we have 2 of them locked in and completed. There's 3 more to go before the game starts deviating from what I've already played. Shortly afterwards, I get round to completing something I had missed out on in the first playthrough. I go to Sakuko's shrine to pick up her letterbox key, which I did originally, but never ended up making use of it. This time though, I immediately head straight back through the town and towards her store to see if there's any special delivery. For my troubles, I pop an achievement and yoink her mail, which confirms that she has autism. Bit of a bad friend move to steal her sensitive health condition mail the day she dies, honestly. When making my way through the Scarecrow fields, I do it much more efficiently this time as I know what to expect, and I complete an achievement for doing the puzzle without a single mistake. Despite this being on hard mode, nothing has posed too much of a recurring threat thus far. Everything just hits a lot harder and is much tankier, and I zoom on through all the way to the game's first major boss. In this battle, there's a hidden achievement for defeating Sakuko without letting her get any of her bell charge attacks off in the second half, and I want to get it this time around. First attempt goes badly. I guess sometimes length does matter, but the second time I decide to play fearless and it all works out. A little later on, as I'm heading back through the town towards the middle school in the mountains, I clear out the big baboon and his army of goons from in front of Sakuko's store, unlocking the achievement for restoring its reputation. I go on a little side quest here across the town. We are going to unlock a new ending. All across the area, are these little UFO-themed posters and radio recordings, and now that the entire town is accessible, I can find them all. I grab them one by one, and once I get to the final one, I'm thrown into this cutscene. Clearly, this is the joke ending, and acts as a bit of a palate cleanser in amongst the doom and gloom thus far. With that done and dusted, I'm 2 out of 5 for endings. Up in the mountains on the way to the middle school, I find another sacred item and shrine to work towards the sacred sword for endings 2 and 3. The school is mostly uneventful, except there's this additional classroom accessible in which we witness the true emotional climax of Silent Hill F. The short king becomes a tall king. This time, when we see a figure walk past the classroom, we have a conversation with them. It's Junko, and in this extended cutscene, she basically spells out that we need to kill our friends and stop being a child. I feel like this is probably symbolic for cutting off her childhood relationships in preparation for being carted off for marriage, but it's funnier if it's literal, so let's go with that. Hinako goes for a snooze, and in the Fox Shrine we wake up with the ritual already complete this time around. In the worship hall, I carefully clear out all of the enemies under the blue lanterns instead of running away from them like a coward, like I did before, earning me the No One Left Behind achievement. This entire section zooms past, and before long, I'm back at this evil chase sequence that debated me and made me fail the last time I did it. I need to do this section perfectly, and to do that, I have to load my save a handful of times. The biggest issue I run into is just getting hit by random things along the way rather than being caught, but eventually I get agile escape. When I make it to Shu's house, I complete my objective of refusing to use those red pills, popping an achievement and getting a heartwarming little bonus cutscene where Hinako says she's gonna stand on her own from now on. Nearby, I get the 4th shrine and sacred item too, so I'm getting real close to seeing something which I imagine is gonna be really cool. The next Otherworld section is short and easy. Once again, because the ritual is already complete, I can zoom through to the end pretty quickly. But I do have a side quest to complete here. There's a new room accessible in New Game Plus, if you can call that a room. Gosh, if this was my room, I'd be a lucky man. In here, there's a cool little bottle to grab that I'll need later, and a puzzle to solve. I need to ring these jingly bells in beat with the wood clacking sounds in the correct order, and when I do it successfully, the water turns red. This is set up for what we'll do soon enough. The next step is to go and defeat Rinko without being hit by a puppet for another achievement. I found the best way to handle this was to just kill the puppets the moment they spawned, even if it did mean the boss fight took way longer than I would have hoped. With that though, we're back in the real world and ready to obtain the sacred sword. I swear, this time it's not me self-promoting on the phone. You can pick it up. After this, we head down the mountain, activate the 5th and final shrine with a sacred object, then head all the way back up the mountain to finally pick up the sacred sword. This thing adds a 4th weapon slot to Hinako's arsenal and never breaks. If you wear it out, it just regens durability over time. This is the point in the game where a split happens. If I purify the sword, we're going for ending 2, and if we keep it cursed as it currently is, we're going for ending 3. I aim for ending 2 first, but I make a save so that we can come back later. We then head up into this little nook in the mountain where the divine water has turned red thanks to our actions, and we purify the blade. Next, we zoom through the town and head to our house, blade in hand, and thanks to it, I'm able to dispatch enemies with significantly less issue than before. In the house, I repeat the same puzzle as before, but this time, I'm a little bit more thorough in my exploration. I get 3 achievements here. Diary of Revenge for collecting all of the related journal notes, Fervent Collector for finding all 6 inventory size upgrade items, and Omamori Sage for finding all of the Omamori hidden around the world. With all of these, we're well over halfway through what's left to get in the game, and more are about to come in with us approaching the tail end of playthrough number 2. We get another for killing Dad Blob first in the dreaded Parents boss fight, which funnily enough just auto-completes it. Apparently last time I had just killed Mum for the love of the game. Then in the final zone, I pick up more collectibles for completing Inari-sama's secrets and the truth about the Tsuneki family. At this point, I've confirmed that Fox Guy is Kotoyuki, the one with an arranged marriage to Hinako, and also the older boy that met her as a child and who has apparently been sending her love letters for a little while. In fact, this entire ending section blows my mind. Firstly, Fox Guy doesn't seem to be all bad. Despite the weird ownership thing and the arranged marriage thing and what seems to be an uncomfortable age gap thing, he does seem to genuinely care about her. Shu comes in, attacks Foxy, Hinako defends him, and the two argue. He admits to her that he knew about the hallucinogenic effects of the red pills. Like, what? I thought he was supposed to be the good guy, the cool dude, the nice lad. This time, he's the boss in a completely new fight, and we face off against what, for all intents and purposes, is Dark Mode Gilgamesh from Final Fantasy. The battle is cool though. You get to be really aggressive, and you're rewarded for well-timed dodges with a limitless supply of stamina, and I don't have much trouble taking him down. At the end, the two guys fist bump in their camaraderies, and the music, tone, and dialogue all make it seem like a happy ending. Except, it's not really. This isn't what Hinako wants, the final scene reflects that. This was more chilling than the first ending, honestly, and I didn't want to leave things as they were. I immediately wanted to continue onwards to the last two endings in the hopes of a happier finale. But for the second playthrough, I got the achievements for Ending 2, as well as 2 more for finishing the game's action and puzzles on hard mode. Lost in the Fog, the most difficult setting, would be soon, but before that we'd be save reloading to redo the last third of the game for Ending 3. This goes fast. At this point I'm very used to the game's combat systems, and I had just gotten done running through the paths and exploring the zones. I remember all the puzzle component locations and which points are essential to visit. Everything else I completely skip. What had taken almost 3 hours en route to ending number 2 tallies up barely an hour of game time when pushing to ending 3. We ignore the Sacred Sword purification and zoom onwards towards Hinako's house, deal with all the leftover shrine shenanigans, and go through what at this point I have come to call the Gauntlet of Suffering. Though I can't quite tell who's suffering more dealing with these repeated forced enemy encounters. Hinako or me? Once all that is done, we get to the new stuff. If ending 2 was Hinako accepting her lot in life and marrying Kotoyuki, this is the opposite. For the final boss fight, Fox Guy transforms into Fox, but for real this time, and despite him having some of the most difficult to read telegraphs in the entirety of the game, I overcome, grabbing the Fox Tamer achievement for killing all of the summoned ads partway through. We learn a lot more about the Fox religion, or really it's a cult, and how in every generation the Fox heir is inexplicably drawn to a spiritually powerful girl, and just has to make her his wife. I'm gonna be so real, this all sounds like the most emotionally manipulative way to get a girl to put on the ring. But babe, you have to. The Fox God has drawn us to one another since birth. Like, come on now. But we take him down and run away into the sunset with our platonic friend Shu as geysers of toxic gas erupt all over town. It's all a little confusing, but at the end I'll piece the endings together into what I think is actually happening in this game. Before that though, I have one more playthrough to complete, the hardest one. I need to beat the game on Lost in the Fog. This combines the toughest puzzles yet with more permutations, as well as the spongiest and most prolific enemy spawns to create a difficulty setting manufactured in the depths of hell for the sole purpose of ruining your day. With that said, it actually wasn't that bad. Imagine for a moment you're 12 years old, starting secondary school for the first time, and you run into the school bully. He looks down at you, eyes furrowed, and gives you 2 options. You can either get punched in the face 3 times, or 2 times. It's up to you. This is what Lost in the Fog as a step up from hard mode is like, and the way I dealt with it was by choosing neither. I elected to simply not get hit. Most of the time. I flew through the early segments of the game at breakneck pace. Less than 30 minutes in and I'm heading towards the Scarecrow Fields puzzle. Because this is New Game Plus Plus, there are a few changes to make your experience more convenient, one of which being that you don't need to repeat the questline to complete the Sacred Sword. In fact, if you visit one of those little shrines, the sword is just going to be sat there waiting for you, almost like it remembers the experiences you've had. So I grab the sword, and after a short detour to grab a key from under Dad Blob's nose, which doesn't go as smoothly as I'd like, I'm on my way. It takes just 1 hour to make my way all the way to Sakako, bap her in the nose, and delve deeply into the mountains. One of the main leftovers that I'm thinking about here for 100% completion is my document collection. You don't need to find every scrap of paper across the entire game, but there is a pretty robust list that you do need, and more documents spawn with each New Game Plus cycle, sometimes replacing those that were there before. This would be well and good if I were tracking it, but I haven't been. I did my first playthrough fully blind and decided that the most responsible way to handle it was just to hope that I had explored thoroughly enough. When I get into the foxhole with the blue lamps and the colour switching puzzle, I find a whole host of new diary entries from Rinko and Sakako, and on the way unlock 2 achievements for completing both of their diaries. The Rinko battle goes smoothly too. At this point I feel like an unstoppable machine of bonk. It turns out that Silent Hill F isn't a survival horror, it's a horror adventure, and the adventure my enemies are on right now is one in the way of pain. As I started heading back into the town, I was happy to learn that the water had already been turned red in this playthrough, so I was able to skip the puzzle entirely and I cleansed the blade once more. As I'm heading back to the Shimizu residence, I pick up a documentation that acts as the final clinical trial note and pop another achievement. On the way up the hill, I head to one of the shrines, the very first we visited in playthrough 2 for the Sacred Sword, and this time I offer it the fox brooch that I've been carrying with me this whole time. This is a brand new option and locks us into the true ending now that all the prerequisites are met. Right alongside it is a New Game Plus Plus exclusive Emma, the final one that I need to unlock my last upgrade and complete that achievement too. With all that done, I only have one use left for my currency, which is to roll for random Omamori from the store until I unlock all of them. I've rolled a decent amount so far and accrued most of the complete set, but I'll likely need to save a bit more to get the rest. There are new scenes from here onwards, and it's clear that this true ending is the one I've been hoping for all this time. Rather than letting somebody else make her decisions for her, Hinako is willing to bear the responsibility for her choices and for herself, and to take the road less trodden despite how tough it is to do. She will make her own decision in her own time, no matter how hard she has to fight for that right. What a Giga Chad, honestly. Wait, why is there a vine boom there? Huh? Like, this isn't edited, that's just in the game. The last boss fight is by far the most difficult, but also the most epic. In this one, I'm up against both Ending 2 and 3's final bosses back to back in a wild 3-phase encounter. There's this insane transition that had me super hyped, in which you can see the reflection of the other Hinako fighting her own battle beneath you in the water, and then it pans down through the looking glass, and look at that, it's Pete. I needed to defeat these bosses within 10 minutes, and I expected that to be a challenge. What I didn't expect though was for surviving to be the real struggle. Lost in the Fog had been kind of simple so far, but this battle took me over an hour. I kept getting two-shotted by their attacks without an opportunity to heal in between. Eventually though, with just one heal left in my bag, I did it. I beat them. With that, I had completed all 5 of Silent Hill F's endings. I was basically done, so I sat back, watched the ending cutscenes, and pieced everything together with a sense of satisfaction. We get a beautiful new start screen, and with that there was just one thing left to do, get a little more currency so that I could pick up the last Omamoris I was missing, which would unlock the final achievement and officially complete Silent Hill F 100%. I booted into another story difficulty run and got to work. Whilst I do that though, I'm sure you're all asking the question I sat on for a few days after finishing. What the hell is going on? It's a bit confusing, right? Well, firstly, yes, but secondly, I can tell you my interpretation at least. We're about to get real deep. I hate to be the guy that's like, ooh, it was all a dream. But I think most of the game isn't real and takes place in Hinako's imagination and memory. She's struggling to make a decision on the hardest choice in her entire life whilst under immense pressure, and is using these bizarre situations as a coping mechanism whilst playing out a more fantastical and horrific fantasy of them in her head, as if it'll dull the stress of what's actually happening. Kotoyuki is the fox guy, the illegitimate heir of the rich, powerful, and likely cursed Fox clan. By clan, I mean cult, that is, and when the legitimate family members mysteriously die, he is imported to take over. As a child, he gets bitten by a fox and is subsequently possessed by the fox deity. The little girl who first tends to him, Hinako. He becomes a bit obsessed with her, either due to some prophecy or maybe that's just his excuse, and they exchange letters for years as they grow, despite the long distance after he moves away. And she likes him too. Hinako's arranged marriage is to him. She's being sold to pay for her father's debts. Hinako isn't actually a schoolgirl by the time this marriage is set to occur. That would be too weird. She's like 20 or maybe in her early 20s. That's why the first ending, when we get the police report, they're talking about a woman in her early 20s, not a child. Hinako is a girl who desperately just wants to be free. She wants to tread her own path. But in a society built like 1960s Japan, subservience is just a way of life for women, as is arranged marriage. She doesn't want that for herself, she doesn't want to be like her mother. The two sides of Hinako, the fox and the schoolgirl, are the side that wants to marry Kotoyuki and the side that doesn't, and they're at war with one another. Fox Hinako's rituals represent marriage, right? You're donning the arm of your husband, giving up even your own surname in the process, branding yourself with them, and even giving up your sense of self, your face, to become a dutiful wife rather than an individual. The fox monster chasing her is her time to make a choice running out. Everything in F, every monster and every grossness is a manifestation of her fears. All the male enemies either resemble her father or are disgusting and perverted, licking her face as they attack, and the women are either faceless, contorted in pain, or a grotesque vehicle for childbirth. Hinako isn't dead, it's a metaphor. Her friends see her as having abandoned them for her better married life, and they resent her for it. Rinko hates her because she is the object of Shu's affection. Sakuko feels like her best friend abandoned her and isn't able to healthily process it, and Shu is in love with her, probably. Speaking of Shu, he comes from a family of pharmacists and he developed this herbal remedy for Hinako's headaches. Though really, what he knowingly gave her are hallucinogens in the red capsules in the hopes that it would help her make the, and this is me quoting him, right choice and see who really has her best interests at heart. In ending 1, that's what leads to the urgent police call we heard. Hinako likely did a little murder in her drug-fueled haze at the wedding, and everything went completely to hell. Endings 2 and 3 are when one side of her wins out over the other. Kotoyuki isn't really a bad guy, not deep down. He's crushed with the expectation of his family line. A love for Hinako he's convinced is divine fate because it makes everything easier to deal with, and likely some actual supernatural fox shenanigans, I think. He doesn't want her to be sad, and when he realizes he can't get through to her and just change her mind, in endings 3 and 4, he amicably accepts her point of view. In ending 4, she has these long conversations with her father and her mother and comes to understand that whilst they did a lot wrong, there was a lot she didn't understand about them either. When you view basically everything in the game through this lens, it all kind of connects quite naturally and makes a lot of sense. But really, what I have to say is this guy, this Ryukishi guy, messed with my head like a decade ago with Umineko, and here he is, doing it again. I can't believe it. With that, I 100%ed Silent Hill F. It was a good game, and despite having its frustrations in those forced combat encounters in the tail end that I had to do 3 times, I'm really glad I played it. I love games that put you in a different world, a different perspective, and a different state of mind, and let you soak up that character's beliefs and hopes. And this was really good for that. I've been thinking of trying Silent Hill 2 soon as I delve a bit more into the series. We'll see. Either way, I know that the next time the fog rolls in, I'm ready for it. Thank you so much for watching this video if you made it all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. I have a Patreon. You don't need to support it, but if you do, it will allow me to keep uploading here more regularly. This video was available early to patrons, and there are updates and exclusive content that go up there regularly. As well as that, you'll be included in the credits of future videos. The people on screen now are the reason I was able to make this one, and I'm really thankful. No pressure though, and of course, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.